Welcome back to the programme. Measures to counteract perceived Russian interference have been making their way through the US Congress this week. On Wednesday, the House of Representatives voted in favour of tackling, quote, covert influence over peoples and governments. The measure, part of the National Defence Authorization Act, evokes memory of the Cold War. Caleb Maupin has the details.
It will be your responsibility, comrades, to purge the minds of the reactionary Americans, so that they will welcome the enlightened Soviet system.
Yes, decades ago, when the Cold War was in full swing, U.S. media and politicians got Americans worked up about the so-called Russian threat. Many similarities can be drawn with a law passed in the 1950s called the McCarthian Internal Security Act. The old law formed a subversive control board to work against the objectives of the world communist movement. The new law calls for a committee to be formed to combat the influence of the Russian Federation over governments and peoples. And just like the old one, it says it's intended to counter disinformation, front groups, and covert broadcasting.
Lying doesn't mean the same thing to a real communist that it means to you and me. They recognize no such things as human dignity or any rights of the individual.
This is a flashback to a time when people who criticized the American government or didn't repeat the standard foreign policy talking points were labeled traitors and foreign agents. One person who was labeled as a Russian agent was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Now masquerading behind the humanitarian banners of civil rights, is contributing tremendous momentum to the communist plans to take over the United States.
If passed, the move will heavily restrict the activities of Russian diplomats. They'll be forbidden from leaving a 25-mile radius around the Russian embassy unless they have explicit permission from the FBI.
There is an hysteria going on in the United States right now, and RT has reported on it because RT is also in the middle of the storm, as is the Ron Paul Institute, which I represent. We've been outed as Russian agents, pushing Putin's view of what America should be. Of course, interestingly enough, President Obama said not long ago that the American elections accurately reflect the will of the American people. So we wonder how long it'll be before he's named as a Russian agent as well. This is, I'm making a joke, but this just shows how the hysteria comes through in America. It's just simply a witch hunt. There's absolutely no basis for going back to this 1950 mentality.
Online publication Glenn Greenwald also pointed out that the wildest conspiracy theories are given credit in the US as long as they implicate Russia and Putin. Now, Glenn Greenwald's statement refers to a recent article published by the Washington Post about, quote, a sophisticated Russian propaganda campaign. The article brands alternative views as so-called fake news and accuses 200 US news sites of being routine peddlers of Moscow propaganda. The list was initially put together by a little-known group called Prop or Not, which claims to be made up of independent political analysts and researchers. We discussed the propaganda craze with Freddy Gray, the deputy editor of Britain's Spectator magazine.
I think it's obvious to anyone with a brain that the Democrats are desperate to blame Russian propaganda for the fact that they dramatically misunderstood the American electorate. But the problem is this creates a sort of atmosphere of hysteria where people see, Russian influence everywhere. I think the whole fake news has a strong Orwellian quality in that I think what the media need to do is remember that they're there to pass a message, not protect a message. And that actually, by sort of telling people that what they're listening to is fake news, that they're indulging in fake news themselves. I think nobody really has an idea of what's true anymore, which is more to do with the sort of collapse of Western morality, perhaps, than anything else. And so, therefore, people are desperate to spy conspiracy. They are desperate to be suspicious of the media, and they generally don't trust what they're reading and what they're listening to. And that's because all around the place they're being pushed a message rather than told what's going on. And I think that's a crisis for the media.